My name is Torbjörn Nyberg, and I was until last autumn a teacher student at the University of Gothenburg, and I am a new teacher, and I'm new at Storyline. I'm performing my first storyline as teacher at this very moment. We're not even done, but I'm also a dungeon master, and I'm quickly going to go through it again. What that entails. I use shelves of books with rules and themes and strange monsters. I write story beats, problems, create characters. I draw maps, and then I add my friends who create their own characters to play in my worlds. And then we use dice and creativity to tell stories wherein my job is only to challenge their characters and sometimes try to kill them, but it's not that far from Storyline. So with a hobby like this, you go to Storyline. Agency is the freedom and control to make meaningful decisions in a given context. And since Storyline is collaborative, we also need the term collaborative agency, which is the freedom and control to make meaningful decisions as a group, which hopefully happens a lot in Storyline. And we'll see how the students experience this. Previous research on agency from many fields prove that agency evokes emotions, but not only good ones. It does evoke a sense of engagement and joy, but also frustration and confusion. And we'll get back to that, because we don't want our students to be confused or frustrated, even though that's sometimes a good thing. It also breeds perseverance. If you own the actions, if you make the decisions and run into problems, you know that it's your decisions that take you out of that problem or tackle that problem. So students have shown with higher levels of agency to tackle problems and not give up as easily. And it can lead to higher levels of learning, but not necessarily, which we'll get to. But first, there are some prerequisites for agentic action to happen, for students to practice the agency that we give them. First of all, we have to view them as learners, active subjects that want to act, that want to take part in this environment. Otherwise, if we see them as objects to be taught, it's not really a point to give them agency. They have to experience freedom and control, and that's basically what this study focused on. If they don't know that they have the freedom and control to make meaningful decisions, to tackle problems, they won't do it. We have to sometimes remind them that this is yours. You make the decisions. You own this. And they need to be given meaningful tasks and significant issues, such as the climate crisis. And we'll see later in the results of this study that sustainability issues is meaningful to these students, at least. They also need authentic recipients and context to practice agency. If I, as a teacher, just tell my students, you should be doing this, solve this problem. Why? For whom? Because I said so. There's not that much motivation to go around for the students. But if this problem is solved for someone else, maybe a person outside of the school, maybe the class next door, or maybe an imaginary character, then that gives them more engagement and more possibility to practice agency. We also need to have learner support, and this is even more important the more agency you give your students. Because if you open up the possibility space, they can get lost and run away from your target learning, what they're supposed to learn through their agency, and they might need your help. And we also need to be flexible to grasp what they decide to do, even though that's not even in the planning of the storyline. If they run that way and that looks good, follow them, encourage them, and be flexible. And then we have some critical aspects for learning through agentic action, because that's partly what we want these students to do. We want them to learn through their agency. And as I previously said, the support and scaffolding is crucial here because of the frustration and confusion that can arise from large possibility spaces for agency. And sometimes even limiting their agency can increase their learning. And we'll get back to that in the results section. They also have to develop competence in decision making. And here is where collaborative agency can help. Because peer-to-peer interactions, making decisions as a group, through your characters as a group, it distances you from making tough decisions. It's your characters in a group. You alone don't have to make the tough decisions that might have to be made. And finally, intersubjectivity is crucial. The students have to understand that the ones I'm working with are other people too, with their own feelings, their own preconceptions of what we're supposed to be doing, their own character. And how is this relevant to storyline? Well, we have from Cresswell that students need to feel a sense of ownership concerning questions and problems in a storyline. Otherwise, there will be no reason for them to engage with them. And here we have the significant issues, the authenticity. It has to be somewhere grounded in real problems that the students feel as authentic and significant. And storyline as a method allows for learners to make decisions, argue their point of view, and consider the effects of their actions. This is highly connected to competence in decision making. To reflect on what decisions you have made, what effects did they have? Were they good? Were they all good? Were they all bad? And storyline is a potent tool for creating authentic context for learners to work with significant issues through reflection and agentic action. And finally, there we have agentic action. They're supposed to own this with our help. We need to participate as well, but it's theirs. They should be doing it. So my study ended up being 28 interviews. I went into the classrooms after performing the 7 that I thought I needed and asked anyone else. And a lot of hands went up. So I interviewed a total of 28 students. And my questions focused around their experience of individual and collaborative agency, the meaningfulness of tasks and decisions made through the storyline, and here asking an 8-year-old what is meaningful is kind of hard. You won't get the answer you want, or maybe not an answer at all. So here I used important. And that's important to know because they're not synonyms. They don't mean exactly the same thing. And how much freedom and control they experience while working with the storyline. And then finally, their experience while practicing collaborative agency. And what I found regarding their experiences of individual and collaborative agency is that the learners describe themselves as in charge within the fictional world of storyline. I had a wonderful quote that I didn't translate, but they describe that, well, the teacher, she or he plans everything around it, but within the fictional story, that's where we are the bosses. We make the decisions. And they also describe themselves as feeling part of a group, working together, helping each other, giving each other ideas, helping others out with ideas. And also using democratic practices. Because working in a group, you might not always have the same opinion. What they do? They voted. And sometimes voting leads to disappointment. They also talked about that. And some of them were very wise and said, well, sometimes we vote and it doesn't go my way. But that sucks. But maybe next time someone else will be disappointed. Also, already covered it, the disappointment factor of being part of democratic practices and dealing with that and understanding that others also have to deal with that. Meaningful decisions and authentic recipients. And most of the students that I asked is this important? The decisions that you make, are they important? Well, yes. We have to have good environment. We have to have sustainable solutions. That is important. Decisions regarding that. Meaningful. Also that they felt that the imaginary characters that themselves created, these don't really look like people. They're paper, string, and fabric. But for them, with a big dash of creativity and role-playing, these characters became as real as a recipient for what they were building, as a real person from the municipality or the city or something. So these characters, this shows that how important these characters are to create meaningful decision making. And finally, how the limitations of their agency led to the decision making within those limitations to be meaningful. The students were building a city, and within the city they had to have buildings. They could have had an infinite number of buildings. Just decide on any number of buildings. We want this, we want this. But the teachers were smart. They said, you can have 10. And with only 10 buildings, you have to pick the most important ones, which makes that decision, just limiting their agency, makes that decision meaningful. And they engaged in that decision and discussed in groups, thought as individuals, argued their point, and came up with creative solutions, such as, well, we need a fire station, we need a hospital, and we need police. What if they were in the same building? And finally, if they experienced limitations on their own agency. There were limitations on their agency, but they never talked as if they felt limited. Within this storyline that they were doing, the decisions they were making to their characters with their peers, they felt fully in control. And I have drawn some didactic consequences from this, what we might need to think about while planning, performing, working with storyline, is that we need to consider the possibility space that we give the students for agentic action. How much support will they need, and in that case, what kind of support? Maybe I should limit their agency. because that might not only help them achieve the learning goals, but also make the decisions more meaningful. And a question that arose for me is that what makes the imaginary words and characters in storyline be experienced as authentic recipients by the learners? And I would like to plug my friend Oliver, who will have a talk about the story, the importance of story and storyline. And I believe that this is a big part of why the characters and the context is experienced as authentic in a storyline. We've talked about agency, but how much, limiting but not removing it, can increase their progress towards the learning goals. And the importance of our flexibility, but also structure, and being vigilant to see where students feel frustrated or confused. And be there, help them through that, and set them on their way again. And something that I noticed in Jessica and Nia's classes who were doing this storyline is that they had pre-established democratic practices. They voted before outside of storyline as well, so they were used to this. So maybe prepare them for working collaboratively by using democratic practices in the classroom, even outside of the storyline, before the storyline, as preparation. And we want the students to grow up and take action, and which only makes it clear that agency is a huge part for sustainable development. We want them to develop competent decision making, to be able to work in democratic practices, to handle disappointment, own the problems, which are significant, that we won't solve them, they will have to. And they have to work with meaningful decision making concerning these significant questions and problems in a safe environment where we can help them to deal with the feelings that can arise with everything feeling bad. And I'm not quite done. If I have the time.
Yeah, you are okay.
Okay, thank you. I would like to read an excerpt from Sir Terry Pratchett's book, Hogfather, because I think that this connects to why the fantasy of the imagination of a storyline is important for these students to tackle these large issues. And this book is about an assassin attempting to kill this world's Santa Claus by removing children's imagination. And this is at the end of the book. And it's a conversation between a girl called Susan and the character Death. "All right," said Susan, "I'm not stupid. You're saying humans need fantasies to make life bearable." "Really? As if it was some kind of pink pill?" "No, humans need fantasy to be human, to be the place where the falling angel meets the rising ape. Tooth fairies? Hogfathers? That's Santa Claus in this world. Yes, as practice. You have to start out learning to believe the little lies, so we can believe the big ones? Yes, justice, mercy, duty, that sort of thing. They're not the same at all. You think so? Then take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder and sieve it to the finest sieve, and then show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy, and yet," Death waved a hand, "and yet you act as if there is some ideal order in the world, as if there is some brightness in the universe by which it may be judged. Yes, but people have got to believe that. Or what's the point? My point exactly. Thank you.